Hello, I'm Kate White, and tonight we'll be presenting 2 more live phone-in programs that will give you the chance to call in with your questions or comments. Next at 8:30, Manhattan at Large will be presented in 2 parts. Part 1, moderated by Lower East Side Councilwoman Miriam Friedlander, will focus on homeless women. Her guest will be Bob White, Director of the Bureau of Adult Institutional Services, New York City Human Resources Administration, Alan Baxter, a social researcher with the Community Service Society, and Helene Fishman, Project Director, Westside Cluster of the Olivieri Center for Homeless Women. Part 2, moderated by Upper East Side Councilman Bob Dreyfus, has as its focus illegal game arcades and enforcement. His guests are Calvin House, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Consumer Affairs, and Carl Weisbrod, Director of the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement. At 9:30, CAP's Film Space will present the revitalization of Union Square Park. Now stay tuned for Manhattan at Large, next on City Channel L.
Thinking that life has passed them by. Don't give up until you drink from the silver cup and ride that highway in the sky. This is for all the single people thinking that love has left them dry. Don't give up until you drink from the silver cup. You never know until you try. Well, I'm on my way. Yes, I'm back to stay. Well, I'm on my way back home.
All right. Hi, this is Manhattan at Large, and I'm Miriam Friedlander, City Councilwoman, Lower Manhattan. And we have with us guests tonight who know all about, well, almost all about, right, the question of homeless women. Who could know about a question like that? Somehow it's been in the papers, and there have been articles about it. Ellen, you've been doing a lot of research on it. What organization are you working with, and how'd you get to do research? Ellen Baxter is working with Community Service Society?
That's right. I do what they call advocacy research on homelessness at the Research Institute at Community Service Society.
I see. Okay. That sounds deep. Have you been at it for a long time?
79, I began on this current project. In the years before that was working around mental health policies,
I see.
deinstitutionalization.
Is there a connection?
A rather direct one, yes.
Okay, we'll get back to that. Helene?
Yes.
And you work with what?
I'm the project director for the Westside Cluster Olivieri Center for Homeless Women.
That's Helene Fishman. When did that open up?
We opened up officially last March 26.
I remember a great big celebration.
That's right, Mayor Koch was there. And
Yes.
But we were opened unofficially before that. We started with a soup line on the sidewalks of New York, feeding soup and bread to homeless men and women of
Oh
New
my
York.
goodness, I thought we weren't going to do that until we had another depression.
Well, that's the way we started. And then we brought the soup line indoors.
I see.
And
They
started
let you open up the door and to get in. It was official? You were paying the rent?
Oh, yes. The reason why we didn't start it right away is because construction was going on in the building, and we had to work out a deal with a wonderful bunch of construction workers.
It was?
Yes, they were
Okay.
very good.
And the women knew to come to you already?
Well, we were men and women at the time.
Yeah.
And we noticed that we were getting many, many more men and very few women. The women were really frightened of the men. And in the middle of May of 1981, I went to the city who funds us and asked them if I could possibly open the program to women only, and they gave me the permission. And we have seen a complete reversal in the services and the atmosphere of the place.
We'll get back to you and hear about that. Okay. And now we have a man who's been working with this for even longer, right?
Yes, yes, Ms.
I mean,
Friedlander.
we've been talking about homeless women. You've seen it in the paper just a short period of time. Bob White, you are the what?
I am the Director of Adult Institutional Services for Human Resource Administration. And I've been...
That sounds very, very severe. Institutional services for adult Okay, tell us.
Those are the shelters.
Those are shelters.
Right. Specifically for the women, I've been involved with the women since July of 1970.
How did that start that far back?
Well,
I thought people weren't giving attention.
Oh yes, oh yes. Not as much as now, but even before that, there was a shelter in a hotel on the Bowery. And of course there were complaints about the service there, and we eventually opened up the shelter at 350 Lafayette.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now that's a beautiful building on Lafayette, isn't it? It's an
It is,
old
it
red
is.
brick building. It almost looks like a courthouse.
Yes, yes. It's an old building. It's well maintained.
Yeah.
And we think the service is excellent.
Well, you know how I can judge it? That's my district down there. And that is the only place I've never received complaints about. And that when somebody threatened to close it, like somebody in HRA, they said, we want to build another shelter. I said, don't you dare. Because everybody in the Lower East Side, the police, the community leaders, just plain people, know where to take the women. How many do they hold there?
Well, that's the problem. It's very small. 47.
Yeah.
47 plus a full bed infirmary at that location. There is an additional shelter in Brooklyn.
We'll get back to that, okay. We have so many things to talk about tonight. Ellen, what did you find? You started saying something about the women and the connection with the mental health problems.
Well, we found that there were three forces that push people into the streets.
Yeah.
One of them was the policy of deinstitutionalization, that is, the releasing of mental patients to communities. They did so with no provisions for follow-up care, particularly housing, supportive
Well, I
housing.
know when
for
the
these
state
people.
did that policy, they had 85,000 in the mental institutions, and they ended up with 25,000.
That's correct. Since '65, there have been about 47,000 people discharged into the New York City area.
Wow.
The state
I
office of
think we
mental...
got them all downtown.
No, I don't. I think they're all over the city and
Are they?
all
Really?
across all boroughs. But deinstitutionalization is only one of the contributing forces to homelessness.
This was also on women, yeah?
That's
Not
right.
just men deinstitutionalized.
No, mental hospitals are comprised in greater proportions of women than men to
Is
begin
that
with.
right? You see, I didn't know that.
The second is the J51 tax incentive, which
Oh,
has
wow.
converted many of the hotels where poor, disabled, dependent people were surviving into higher class
Is this what
dwellings.
we commonly call the SROs?
That's right.
The single room
Room
occupancy, is that the thing? Right.
And since 1975, 33,000 units have been lost to conversion.
Now I know what I've been fighting in the city council. Okay, we want to stop that from happening. As a matter of fact, we want to create, and I think even today, I heard the governor speaking about creating more single occupancy shelters. I don't know where he's going to get the money, but I think the idea, what you're saying.
And just the shrinkage of the low-income housing stock has forced
Right.
many people on fixed incomes to the streets. You know, rents are raised, they're evicted.
What happens? Does a woman just say, I can't pay my rent, or she's being evicted? And is that why she picks up her belongings and goes? What would you say?
Well, there's not one common denominator to the stories that we hear.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story why they're homeless. There's always a reason why a person is homeless. It just doesn't happen to you.
No.
I'm not homeless, you're not homeless, Mr. White is not homeless, Ellen is not homeless. There's a reason.
Yeah.
Very often what happened is, for example, with a deinstitutionalized patient, they were referred to an SRO hotel.
Yeah.
They arrive there. For some reason or other, sometimes it's because the building has been converted, or sometimes because the person stopped medication and became acting out or obnoxious to the neighbors, they are put out. The person just cannot put it together themselves. What happens is that they just fall through the cracks. It's just, they can't
Nobody
go
to
to
tell,
a
there's
welfare
nobody to
center.
help.
They just don't know how. They can't. And this is why they land on the street. Sometimes it's a person who was burnt out or evicted from a building and just doesn't know that there's a place to go. You can go to the Red Cross, you can go to the police.
And
They
nobody to
just
help.
don't know. That's
Nobody to
right.
help. Why is it, and have any of you had experience, why is it when I see the men who go to the shelter down in our area, 3rd Street, They're just by themselves, or they got a jacket, or they got something in the hip pocket. But the women are almost always carrying bags, belongings. Is there a reason that?
Well, those are the ones with the bags. There are quite a few without bags.
Without bags.
That you would not really recognize unless you are familiar with the problem of homelessness.
Uh-huh.
You walk into the stations, the terminals.
Yeah.
The little ladies will be sitting there with the very clean and very petite, and they are homeless because they're sitting there all night. They're very clean. They keep themselves clean by washing in the ladies' room, washing their clothing in the ladies' room.
I see. And they don't have their belongings. They don't have bags.
Apparently, they store them in lockers, or you know.
You know, this
the,
is
the ones
another
with the bags are the
problem.
more obvious ones.
Yeah, I see. So we do have a large proportion of them without belongings and just sort of thrown out by themselves?
Sure.
Right.
And Mr. White's really very right about the sort of stereotypical shopping bag lady with lots of bags and layered clothing and smelly and screaming, gesticulating on.
That's not true. That's a stereotype. So that we are now not. We have to know the reality of the problem of what we're dealing with. These are people who are hanging on to their own self-respect. Is that it? They're trying to, even though they don't know where to go or what to do. And what
One of the things that I wanted to say, to go back to Mr. White's point, is that one of the things that I find that I'm doing at my shelter is that making the women more invisible. Because we do provide shelter, we provide showers, we provide clothing. Many of the women leave their belongings overnight
Where are
with
you,
us.
by the way? I mean, this is
at
getting,
257
a lot of
West.
people are going to ask me.
Okay, 257 West 30th Street in Manhattan. We're a block away from Penn Station, right where we should be.
Right. Good.
And because we make all these things available to the women, they become even more invisible. They look like you and I. They walk the street, they clean, they have clean clothing, they just have taken a shower. They may have 1 or 2 bags, but if you go to Macy's, you walk around with a couple of bags also.
Right.
So they become even more invisible. And now that we open all night, they are completely invisible because they're not even in the train station anymore or in the bus stations. They're with us, but they're still homeless because we're not at home.
Right. Well, since you've been dealing with the problem so long, there have been all kinds of figures thrown around. You know, how big is this problem, and what have you been doing over this period of time to meet it?
It's a growing phenomenon. I have no idea exactly what the number is.
Okay. This is the perpetual argument. But
Yeah,
we won't
I
pin you down
have
to
no
it. Go
idea
ahead.
what the exact number is.
Yeah.
But we do know that we are serving 4 or 5 times as many women this year as we served 4 or 5 years ago.
Why are you serving more this year?
Because we have the space for them.
Oh, you've opened up more shelters.
Right. Years past, we were turning away more women than we were actually serving, solely because we didn't have vacancies.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, how many shelters do you have now?
We have 3 at this point.
Right.
1 in Brooklyn, 2 in Manhattan.
Right. Well, the Manhattan one has pretty good reputation. There were some problems about Brooklyn. What happened with that shelter?
Yes, as I was saying, we attempted to design this facility on the model that exists for the men, the kind of service that exists
So
for
now we
men.
have a different problem.
because-
Women are women.
Right, because
Okay.
we were criticized. We were criticized because of the kind of service that we were offering at 350. And we tried to make the service more liberal, take away some of the restrictions, some of the eligibility criteria.
You're giving me shop talk. Tell me what it's about. What did you restrict before? What are you opening up now?
Okay, all right, okay. We're taking 18-year-olds, we're taking much younger women, we're taking
Are
pregnant.
there the 18-year-olds around on the street?
Oh my God, yes. There's
Tell me about it.
13-year-olds on the streets.
I know they're on the street, but that's right, they are homeless,
I have
aren't they?
the woman and her 13-year-old daughter who for 2 years lived in an abandoned building in Manhattan.
Yes.
Now, right now, the daughter is in the chair of the CBW, the Bureau of Child Welfare,
Right.
and the mother's still on the street. You know, but for 2 years, this young woman, very young woman, a girl almost, was on the street with her mom who's very ill.
Right. Okay. So you're taking the men younger now. You had a restriction against that before.
Right, the minimum age previously was 21.
Right.
You know, now we're taking them at 18. We're taking women who are pregnant, who have history of drug addiction, but who are not currently addicted.
I see. Who are in previous addiction
Right.
programs?
Yes,
and such?
yes.
Right.
So we're taking them now. In addition to that, as Ellen has said, the number is increasing. partly because of deinstitutionalization, and partly because of individuals not getting into hospitals initially. See, when we think of deinstitutionalization, we think of people who've been discharged.
Yeah.
But we don't think about the ones who never get there because the criteria is so difficult, you see.
I see. Is that what you found, Ellen, in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. White is also right about the number. I know that Community Service Society has been attached to that magical 36,000 number. And
That's men and women.
that's right. And the number for women that's been thrown around is 6,000 women.
Yeah.
And we have made it perfectly clear that that is a wild estimate that was based...
Ellen, you don't look wild.
And it really, I think...
It's your research?
I think it's not the point. I
Yeah.
don't think that the precision of the number is the point.
Right.
Anyone who lives in Manhattan, any New Yorker knows that there are many, many women in all the boroughs. They're on all the avenues, they're on all the, they're around the perimeter of Central Park, they're in Inwood Park, they're in George Washington Bus Terminal, they're all over the place. And I think it's a mistake to quantify an issue which is so
Right.
tragic.
Well, it seems to me, here you've said, you started out with a shelter for 47, the city did that. You have now opened up in Brooklyn, what's that, 200?
190.
190, okay, approximately. Except on a bad day when you shoot in 200, okay? Fine. Now you have Lower East Side,
Right.
and that's what, 80?
Approximately 80, yes.
Approximately 80. So what are we dealing with
About 300, 315 a day.
315 and stuff. And you're taking, how many are walking through your place in one day?
Well, we've only been open 24 hours a day since December the 24th. Christmas Eve, we opened up 24 hours a day. And last night...
No beds, though?
No beds, but we slept. I mean, people stayed overnight. 76 women stayed overnight with us last night.
Where do they sit? Where do they go?
They sleep on the floor, which is a tile floor downstairs and a concrete floor upstairs, or in chairs.
Wow. And you have no place to send them?
You know, it's very hard to send somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you know, we don't have a
Right.
van, we don't have transportation, and very often what we find is a tremendous amount of resistance of going anywhere else. I mean, they found us and they want to stay with us. They
I
really
see.
don't want to be shuffled from one place to another. They want to stay with us.
Is this a characteristic of women, that they have more of a problem of being brought into a facility than the men?
Women on the streets tend to be afraid. They have been abused and neglected for long, long periods of time, and they can be very well defended. And to live on the street requires a certain strength and a certain protection. And women are not likely to drop all those in order to be given a bed by someone who, in the past, has been abusive. They're not
You
certain.
mean in an institution?
That's right. But at a place like Helene's, few questions are asked, their
None.
meals, their showers.
None are
No
asked.
questions are asked, their meals, their showers. And the women,
And they don't have to share if they don't want to. I want you to understand it's there if they want it. People come and go as they please. They are really, we outreach to their women. We sit down and we talk to them. We try to find out if they need services. But if they don't want to give us their name, that's fine too.
Right.
They're
I
entitled
was
to their
telling you the
privacy.
story before that this special shelter on 2nd Street, and probably one of the oldest ones to deal with the problems of women on the street, and that's the Catholic Workers Shelter.
That's on 3rd Street.
Is it on 3rd?
Yes.
Oh, Catholic Workers on 2nd, the shelter's on 3rd. You're right. Okay. But the story that they tell there of this woman who came for a month and knocked on the door, and the door opened, but she would never go in. And finally she came in and she just sat inside until she had the confidence, you know, that she would not be pushed around or abused. Is that still a problem? You were saying you're changing your rules.
Yes, that is...
That you were not... didn't understand enough in the beginning the kind of procedures and the kind of responses that the women
Right.
needed.
What really happened, Ms. Friedlander, we realized that the so-called shopping bag ladies were not coming into the shelter. Were not coming into the shelter.
Right.
And as a result of that, HRA funded 2 programs, one of which is Helene's.
Right.
The other one is the Moravian Church. You know, because we realized that these were people who would not submit to answering questions, to examinations, to showers or whatever.
Right.
And we tried to develop the kind of program where there would be few of any questions asked, where they could just walk in and get a meal or shower if they wanted it. That's how the Olivieri
Well, I'm glad
Center-
you're doing it there, but what about in your own program? Are you also
Well,
modifying your program so that it is more acceptable to the
It has been modified, but I think when you are operating a residence, I think you have to have certain requirements for the protection of the individuals who will accept that service.
I see.
You see, if you have 100, 200 women living in a facility, and individuals who come in do not take showers or are not deloused, then everyone has.
And it's bad seen.
Right. So
No,
you
I
have to
agree.
you have to protect those who you have in the facility.
And there are enough people who will go in and accept that
At
kind
this
of a,
point, yes,
of a
yes.
discipline,
Yes.
right?
I think Mr. White is right. You cannot offer uniform services. It's not a uniform population. I think
see.
what we have to think about is a continuum of service,
Yeah.
starting with the very low level that we offer, which is
Right.
really nothing.
Just
We
walk in the door.
walk in the door
Out
and
of the
be there.
out of the rain, out of the snow.
That's right.
Sure.
And then little by little, if these women get to trust us and get to believe that somebody out there really likes, cares for them and loves them, maybe the next step could be possibly a
shelter.
residence.
Right.
Right,
Yes,
the
yes,
shelter
yes,
residence.
yes.
Tell me, Ellen, where do we go with this?
Well,
I mean, we first of all, you believe we're going to be providing more and more shelters?
Of course.
Because obviously more SROs are getting emptied, and there are going to be more problems since the prices are going up, and there are less food stamps and less services, and women are living longer and
Yes.
faced with less money when they retire or the husbands die. So I think we're going to have a larger population, right?
not only will there be a larger population, but for the currently sheltered, I mean, shelter isn't enough. People need more than a dormitory cot to
Right.
live decently. They need some housing that they can afford.
Privacy.
They need some privacy.
Right.
Some people need assistance in living semi-independently. Others can do so as long as they can afford it.
Right.
But the development of low-cost housing and supportive residences is the direction to go. It's housing stock which has to be developed for this.
You see, one of my dreams is that we have, the first step of my dream was the center that I'm operating now. We just went 24 hours a day, which is something that I've always hoped to accomplish. The next step, what I would like to do, is to attach a residence to the center. Women that we have worked with for the last year, they would be ready because they know us. If they know that Helene is running this place, they know Helene is running the other place, it's going to work. I know it's going to work. The point is putting together the next package, you know.
Does that mean permanent residency?
If the women want to, and you know, you may end up having a turnover. Some of our women like to travel. Some of them do.
Travel, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
You know, they like everybody else. I mean, sometimes they need a change of scenery.
Right.
I think that most of the women, I would say probably 80% of the women, it will be permanent housing for them.
It's
And
like
it
a
will-
single room occupancy or congruent living that
That's
we're
correct,
talking about
yes.
now. Is that the
Yes.
kind of thing?
But this is my next
Your
dream. I mean, you know.
Well, I think we have to start talking budgets, don't we, on things like that and programs. Do you think that's a feasible thing, Bob?
Exactly. Of course it is. We are looking into possible interim houses,
City-owned houses,
right,
for those who don't know.
that we could convert to this kind of resident that Helene is referring to. You know, because there are people who will need some sort of support for a
Right.
long length of time, and if they know it's secure, the place is secure, it's safe, they will feel comfortable living there.
Right.
But it has to be safe. It has to be safe.
Right. Not only that, but for instance, we've had experience in the men's shelter and such, where we have also given some kind of psychological support, psychiatric support, mental health support, this type of thing. Do you envision that kind of program being developed even with the shelter?
Sure, the CSS,
CSS.
Yes, yes.
Spell it out for us. Not everybody knows. the
community
initials.
support systems, yes.
And they're partially funded by the state, right?
yes,
And the
right.
city.
Yes.
Okay, we got that much done,
Right,
didn't we?
right,
We
we
did it
did.
through the men's shelter program. Go
Yes,
ahead.
yes. Matter of fact, we are attempting to develop one for the Bushwick Center in Brooklyn.
Oh,
now.
wonderful.
We're almost sure that we're going to get that one.
That would be wonderful.
Yes.
Do they sleep there? Do they get meals there?
They sleep there. They get meals there. The meals are transported from one of the centers out in Rockaways, Neponset, by the way.
Right.
The food is taken from there, and the social workers are located there. They have to come into the city for the medical services, however.
I see. Do you have buses to take them back?
We have vans to bring them in.
I
for
think
medical
HRA
appointments.
has the best bus system in the whole world. I see people being transported to and from shelters. What, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning?
That's right.
This goes on all day. Are you doing that now for the women?
We are doing that for the women. Usually our last van for the women goes out about 2:30 in the morning.
From where? Where do you
From
pick them?
350 Lafayette.
Uh-huh. Oh, they have to go there first to be
Yes,
picked up?
yes.
And then to go. Do you pick them up from Helene's shelter?
No, we don't pick them up from
Not
Helene,
yet.
but we're picking them up from the stations.
What do you do at the station?
We have a unit that goes out to in the stations, the terminals, 5 nights a week from 9 until about 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
They visit the ladies' rooms in the stations. They stop in the street. There's a place known as the Wall in back of Port Authority where people sit. They try and encourage the individuals to come in. That's done 5 nights a week.
I see.
And they are taken to 350 Lafayette.
You don't do like was suggested by a certain magistrate of this city at the opening of your thing. You don't go out and sweep.
Oh,
them.
no. This is all voluntary. This is all voluntary.
This is all voluntary,
Yes.
okay.
Matter of fact, a lot of the people that we've talked to, we've gotten to know, and they expect us to come. They still haven't come into the shelter, however.
Oh, they wait for you to
They
come.
will take the coffee and the cookies, but they haven't accepted our service yet.
I see. Okay. So you give service right on the street.
Coffee, cookies, and cigarettes.
And not cigarettes. So where do you think we're going now that we've identified the problem a little bit? We've started to give some services.
I think that we have started. The ball is rolling. There's
Yeah.
plenty of us out there on the street, trying to help the women, and I think there's much more that needs to be done. Our center was successful to get the women medical services on the premises. St. Vincent's has a part-time clinic.
I heard about that.
At
Yes,
my
they talked to
place
me about it.
for 3 half-days a week. It's Dr. Brickner runs the community medicine
more help?
department.
Does everybody need more help?
You mean volunteers?
Well, volunteer is one thing, but what about services?
What about donations?
What about donations?
Yes.
How about that?
We could use
The president
donations,
said we have to
definitely.
depend more on private.
Financial, as well as food donations. We could use extra food. We really are running low
Where
on
should
food.
they send it if they want to?
At 257 West 30th Street.
Do you take food, clothes?
Yes. Clothing, yes, especially large sizes, by the way. If I can put a
Wow,
plug.
how about that? If you're getting too thin and your clothes don't fit you anymore,
Another
please.
thing that we could use is the services of psychiatrists on a voluntary basis. Sometime we are trying to work out a deal now with the city and the state, but it's still in the working stage. It's not fast enough as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
We're getting the medical services now. We need the psychiatric support.
Okay. I think that we have just begun to touch the subject, and this is the subject of women, not just homeless women, but women in the city of New York who could easily tomorrow be the homeless women. And here you have only touched on those who have already been turned out for one reason or another. Very sensitive to the problems, beset by a lot of problems, and also subject to a lot of violence in the process of this. Mental,
Incredible.
physical, terrible problems. I think we have started a consciousness of it here. And what we are saying here tonight is that we have to begin to give more program, more work, more money. And we thank you all for the work you've been doing. Helene Fishman, Ellen Baxter, Bob White. I'm Miriam Friedlander, City Councilwoman. Have a good evening.
All the lonely people, thinking that life has passed them by. Don't give up until you drink from the silver cup and ride that